this promise, guideline from the Old Testament, is generosity. Generosity brings prosperity. Look at Proverbs 11:25. It says, "A generous man will prosper. He who refreshes others will himself be refreshed." You know that whole concept of The Secret, where you put out positive thoughts and you get positive things back? That's not biblical. But what is biblical is that the person who is generous will receive generosity back. That is biblical. The people who are generous to others will receive generosity from others. Have you ever experienced that? Have you ever been really just friendly to someone and they come back, friendly to you? Maybe you're in the grocery store and you're standing at the counter and you're getting ready to buy something, and the person there looks kind of gloomy, and you give them a nice friendly face and you say, "Hi, how you doing?" And they look at you shocked, and then a couple seconds later their face softens. They say, "Well, I'm doing all right now," or something. You give generosity out, you do get generosity back. God did design people to work that way. It's not necessarily a supernatural law of the universe. God just made you and me to do that. But look at this next verse in Deuteronomy 15. For those of you who are paying attention, you'll notice that Deuteronomy 15 here, verses 10 through 11, is the same chapter that we just read in the previous section, Deuteronomy 15, 4 through 5. It's a whole chapter on prosperity. If you'd like to read it, go ahead and do so. It's good stuff. But look at this one here. God says, "Give generously to him and do so." This him is a poor person in their midst. If there is anyone in your midst who is poor, God says, "Give generously to him and do so without a grudging heart. Then because of this, the Lord your God will bless you in all your work and in everything you put your hand to. There will always be poor people in the land. Therefore I command you to be open-handed toward your brothers and toward the poor and needy in your land." There's one twist here from the Proverbs passage. The Proverbs passage says if you're generous to others, then you will be refreshed back. If you refresh others, you will be refreshed back. Here in Deuteronomy, it tells us that even if other people don't do it, God will do it for you. If you are generous to others, God will bless you. Did you see that? God will bless you in all your work and in everything you put your hand to. That's a pretty remarkable promise right there too. And one other thing I'll mention here is that this verse says there will always be poor people. But the previous verse said there should be no poor among you. Do you see the difference between the should and the is? The difference between the reality and the ideal? In order for us to reach the ideal, God's design is for those who have to be generous to those who don't. This is a principle that shows up all throughout the Bible. It is one of the fundamental prosperity principles that you will find actually printed in the pages of God's Word. It is that those who have should take care of those who don't. To illustrate this, I've got a little video clip for you. Maybe you recognize this clip. It was on the news a little while ago. Let's go ahead and check it out.
If the economy is good for folks from the bottom up, it's going to be good for everybody. If you've got a plumbing business, you're going to be better off if you've got a whole bunch of customers who can afford to hire. I think when you spread the wealth around, it's good for it. When you spread the wealth around, it's good for it. But listen, I respect what you do, and I respect your question.
I did that in the middle. When you spread the wealth around, it's good for everybody. Okay, so we live in a society where there are some people who really believe you need to spread the wealth around. And I remember when I was younger, I thought that socialism was a really good idea. I'm telling you the truth. I thought it was a good idea because, Jesus says we should take care of people's needs, and the ideals of socialism sound so great until you realize that it really requires a despotic government to control and suppress and do all kinds of nasty things to its people in order to keep the socialism kind of thing happening. And so now I'm more of a capitalist, and I'm okay with that. But there's something I want you to know. I did a little economic research last night, because everybody's complaining about the economy. 2008, the gross domestic product of the United States was estimated to be $14.5 billion. Gross domestic product. Here's the deal. Per person, that works out to $48,000. So let's see, I've got 4 people in my family. I should be making $200,000. Our household should be making about $200,000. Just based on the gross domestic product of the United States. This is what interests me, okay? If we lived in a society where everything were equally divided, everything was split up, then every single human being in our country would have $48,000 every year added to their name. That's remarkable. Now, of course, 2009 might be a little lower than that, but 2008 wasn't that great either. And so, I mean, this is what I'm thinking. There should be no poor in our land. You see that? Do you understand that? If we have enough for every human being to have $48,000 associated with their name. Now, I'm no economist. I just know a little bit of math, and so I don't know necessarily how economy stuff works on a large scale. But I have to think, if we have that much wealth flowing around in our country, how is it that we can still have children who can't be nourished in this country? How do we still have poor people in this country? God told us that if we would be generous, He would bless everything we do. Seems like a pretty remarkable promise to me. But here's the deal. We need to do it both directly. God said, be open-handed to the poor. We need to do it directly. We need to go to places where the poor are, and we need to get the resources to them directly. If someone asks me for a handout, then I need to begin the mind process. How can I say yes to this? How can I say yes to this in a way that honors their dignity and in a way that does not lead them into greater vice, if it is some type of vice that caused them to be in the place where they're in? But I need to begin to think in some kind of fashion of how can I be generous? We need to do that directly. We also need to do that indirectly. Of course, the government wants to do it indirectly for us. You know, you give your money to the government, and then they take it and they spread it where they think it needs to go. The Bible had this idea long before the government had this idea. Okay? And it was actually called the tithe. I want to read to you a passage from Malachi chapter 3. It's on the